Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dharati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Naishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sabdutam Paridana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitanscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaudangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Trubhyascha Krupa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavari Paschata Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna everyone. So
Hare Krishna.
Welcome to verse 2 of this Nectar of Instruction study. So we'll just do a quick recap. Last week we spoke about the 6 urges that we are trying to control. The urge to speak, the urges of the mind, of anger, the tongue, the belly, the genitals. And Srila Rupa Goswami was guiding us that this urges should be controlled. And controlled means that we do not stop these urges, but we use them in Krishna conscious ways that are productive. And so when we speak about the Supreme Lord and His forms and pastimes and qualities. We use our mind to think and relish these various aspects of the Lord. Anger to protect the devotees and the Supreme Lord. The tongue to honor Krishna Prasadam. The belly, sufficient to keep the body healthy, but not too much, not too little. And the genitals used to procreate for the propagation of Krishna consciousness. So these 6 urges, when one has controlled them, becomes the true Goswami, or master of the senses. As we learn in a preface, the first activity is to control the mind and senses. And so these 6 urges were discussed. And now in verse 2, Rupa Goswami is presenting the 6 impediments on the progress of our path of devotional service. On any journey, we should know, hey, what impediments or what obstacles might I face on that journey? And if I know about those impediments, I can make plans to address them, to overcome them, to work around them. Right? And so we should be mindful of that. So Rupa Goswami very graciously for us is highlighting these 6 impediments. So for anyone who wants to engage in pure devotional service, it is extraordinarily important to follow the instructions of these verses. One who neglects these, the attention to these 6 impediments will find it very, very difficult to awaken this dormant love of Lord Hari. It is very, very difficult if we do not work to manage these impediments. And so we'll discuss them in detail. And Rupa Goswami explains these as vinashyati, that one destroys our bhakti with these 6 impediments. So we'll discuss them in detail today. So there are 4 words that can summarize the whole theme or concept here. Anybody care to offer a guess? There are 4 words that can summarize the whole concept of this verse. And there's a famous quote from Srila Prabhupada. He used to always speak this.
Can you repeat the question, Prabhu?
Yeah, the 4 words that can summarize the theme of this verse. Okay, well, I'll offer it. And then, so the 4 words looking for Srila Prabhupada spoke about was this concept of simple living, high thinking. And it's a very, very powerful theme to bring into our life. And as we bring simple living, high thinking into our life, we'll find increasing bliss and happiness and decreasing stress and anxiety. And what does simple living, high thinking mean? It means that we live in a very simple, basic way. We maintain our needs of the body in a sufficient way. And then we use the precious resources of life for high thinking. And so what are the 2 most precious resources we have? This is something that if we don't identify, we sometimes will waste these resources. The 2 most precious resources we have are time and our intelligence. With all the money in the world, a man on his deathbed cannot buy a moment of time more than what is destined for that person. Time is an extraordinary, precious resource. And our intelligence. In this human form of life, among the 8.4 million species of life, we have this higher intelligence. And so, simple living, high thinking means to use our time and intelligence very wisely. These precious assets, if we use them very nicely, very intelligently, then we'll make success. We have to use our intelligence certainly to maintain our body, to find ways to keep the soul and body together so that it may be used in the service of Krishna. But work enough just to maintain the basic needs so that we can use our remaining time and our remaining energy and our remaining intelligence to work towards the real purpose of life, which is to awaken our dormant love for Krishna, to engage in our Sanatana Dharma, our eternal occupation, which is rendering devotional service. So, by simplifying the bodily needs of our existence, we can then redirect and utilize our time and intelligence for those. The more sophisticated we try to live, the more stress we have. The rich man has so many anxieties. How to maintain the home, the 4 or 5 cars, security to make sure nobody breaks in. And all this takes so much time and stress. A simple man living in a hermitage or a hut has nothing to worry. So this simple living allows one to pursue high thinking. And high thinking is the ultimate purpose of life. Our higher intelligence is meant not to eat nicely, sleep nicely, mate nicely, and defend nicely, but to bring about the process of self-realization so that we can achieve the ultimate goal of life in finding peace and happiness with Krishna. So this simple living, high thinking, we'll see as an overarching theme of this verse. And the impediments that Rupa Goswami will speak of will go in direct opposition to this concept of simple living, high thinking. Okay. So now the 6 impediments. We'll review the 6 in total and then go through each one in detail. overindulging, eating more than necessary, acquiring more things than necessary. Over endeavor, working very, very hard to acquire those things. Unnecessary talking, just prajalpa, just useless talking like the toads croaking in the forest. Niyamagraha, this following the regulative principles of, or the scriptural injunctions for the wrong purposes, or rejecting the scriptural injunctions that can yield the right purpose. Worldly association, this janasangas, this associating with those who are not interested in spiritual life. And then greed, material greed. So these 6 things, they dampen our progress in devotional life. When we examine, and sometimes we'll see ups and downs in our spiritual life. And when we are in those low points, we can look to these 6 factors and see which one maybe is hindering my progress. Which one is weighing on me more today than it was previously? And then we can work to manage those obstacles, those impediments. But these 6 things assure the destruction of our devotional service. Very, very difficult. So, atyahara. Let's first define atyahara. It's defined as one accepts sense objects for one's sense gratification. That is atyahara. And it is the process of, taking more than necessary. And it's very broadly defined. Prabhupada in the translation talks about eating more than necessary. And that's one of the main forms of atyahara. Working very lavishly to satisfy the urges of the tongue. In essence, we talked about tolerating the urges of the tongue in verse 1. But this atyahara is acquiring more than what's necessary. The 5,000 square foot home when a simple 1,200 square foot ranch would suffice. The 3 cars in the driveway. The, iPhone 11 when the 7 is working just fine. And so on and so forth. So this overindulging is considered atyahara. And again, it's broadly defined. Sometimes even, we see philanthropists, acquiring money. It's ultimately still for one's sense gratification, the feeling of, being able to, do great philanthropy, or pass on wealth to our family in generations to come. Acquiring excessive knowledge, jnana, is also considered atyahara. The over study can lead to atyahara. So we should, understand the deep principles of Krishna consciousness and not get stuck into the, over analysis of the Vedic scriptures. And we see a lot of the Vedantists who will go through this process. So it's a very broad term. And the point here is that we should acquire things and use things only to the extent they can be used to satisfy Krishna's senses. So it is not that the things around us in the world we should not use, but we try to limit the use of them for our own senses. Whatever our basic needs are fine. But to overindulge becomes very dangerous in the process of our devotional service. So the key is to acquire just enough. Not too little either, because too little can lead to difficulties that then make it difficult for us to practice devotional service. So not too much is being referenced here, but also the other side should be kept in mind. And because when we do, we create major impediments. And Srila Prabhupada gives the example of, the birds. When a bag of rice is put out into the forest, the birds will take some sufficient amount of rice to be able to, satisfy its needs. But humans, if you put a bag of rice, they'll take the whole thing and they'll store it, well beyond its needs. So this propensity for atyahara is very prevalent in the human form of life. In the animal form of life, we do not see such. And Prabhupada comments about why we see such shortages in the world. It is due to this atyahara principle, this overindulging beyond the basic needs. Now, atyahara is a very individual matter, meaning, oh, this person is eating 4 chapatis, that is atyahara. What is sufficient for one may not be sufficient or may be excessive for another. So it is a matter of personal introspection. And so we should be careful not to judge the, atyahara of others. We should focus on ourselves. We know what is sufficient, what is too much, what is too little. And so, we should manage this not with the notion of extremes. I see somebody, driving a very fancy car. Oh, they are overindulging. Maybe, maybe not. Or I see somebody walking around in the snow in the winter with no shoes. Oh, that is very austere. They have mastered atyahara. Maybe, maybe not. So better not to judge, but it is for our own introspection and the help sometimes of our, seniors who can guide us, in this process of applying atyahara. But it is a very important principle because we'll see from this links all these other impediments. Because as soon as we have this desire and need for overindulging too much, it leads to prayasas. The result of prayasas is now I have to endeavor, I have to work hard to satisfy these needs. I have to over-endeavor. Right? So more than our basic needs, when they're there, then I have to work very, very hard. And then I misused my intelligence, right? I think I use my intelligence to figure out how I can make more widgets through the factory. How I can make more time in the day so I can work an extra few hours so that I can make some more money. So I use my intelligence, but I use it in a means to satisfy my atyahara. So this over-endeavoring. And there are many, many examples of over-endeavor. We see it all around us, right? Prabhupada talks about the factories, and sometimes we wonder, what's wrong with factories? We need things. Well, if we really analyze in a simple living concept, actually everything we need is provided for by nature. Our food, our shelter, everything, even our medicines are provided in nature. So the factories, we talk about, climate change and pollution and environmental cleanup. Well, by controlling atyahara, by naturally the environmental cleanup, if we don't really need so many of these things, and due to this, and we'll talk about greed, we see this overproduction and overconsumption by us. So this is an example. Our work life. We work 40, 50, 60, 70 hours just slaving away at the office so that we can try to satisfy our different aspects of atyahara. And, Prabhupada, talks about Krishna. Krishna has no work to do. He is simply enjoying playing on his flute. And because we are part and parcel of Krishna, we also are meant not to work like dogs and asses. We are meant to simply enjoy with Krishna. But we see, in America, even, this idea of work. You work 50 weeks a year for 2 weeks of vacation. At least in other parts of the world, you get 4, 5, 6 weeks of vacation, holiday. This overworking. Of course, work is required. We must, do some job if we are in grahastha life. But over-endeavoring is the point here. So again, balance and understanding its application is critical. Working for Krishna and Krishna's success is never over-endeavoring. Srila Prabhupada worked day and night, 22 hours a day. He endeavored. But he was not endeavoring for his sense gratification. He was endeavoring for the service of Krishna and for all of our benefit. So endeavoring is not the problem. We'll see next week in verse 3 the need to be enthusiastic, to put forth great effort. But again, this is endeavoring for the senses. Constant running, more and more and more, right? This is constantly there. So this prayasas becomes very, very, prevalent, and is very, very prevalent today. How hard everyone is working. So much labor. And this atyahara and prayasas are very tightly linked and deeply embedded in society. This huge consumerism, it leads to this atyahara and prayasas. So, oh, let's come to this class or come to this program or serve in the temple or do something. No time, no time, no time. Why no time? Because we are using our time poorly. We have time, but the time, this precious resource, we are not using intelligently. Instead, we are being succumbed to this atyahara and prayasas impediments. So we can see very practically, the more time we spend trying to serve our senses, the less time we have for Krishna. So this atyahara and prayasas. Srila Rupa Goswami is guiding us. Prajalpa. It's scary how much prajalpa takes place. This unnecessary talking. Anything that is actually not in a productive speaking of Krishna ends up in prajalpa. We said time is our most precious gift because this human form of life is most precious. And if we don't make good decisions with this human form of life, we risk falling down the evolutionary chain again. And who knows how many millions of years it will take for us to regain this human form of life. And so when we acquire this human form of life, what do we see? Simply effort to try to pass time between point A and point B as comfortably and as less boring as possible. We're trying to kill boredom. That is it. How I can pass time. If we really analyze, what is the value? Prabhupada talks about, newspapers and novels and crossword puzzles. Why do we do a crossword puzzle? Just to kill time while we're sitting on the subway or sitting on a plane. But what is the real value? And if we step back, we can see that how much prajalpa is taking place. It's a colossal waste of this most precious resource, time. Retired folks, playing cards and fishing and playing golf. To what end? Simply to try to pass the time of old age as pleasantly as possible. But what is being gained by those activities? So Rupa Goswami is guiding us that we should manage this prajalpa very tightly. And again, it's very broadly defined. It is not just speaking, but it is how we utilize our time. An intelligent person uses the time to accomplish something. Well, the only thing we can accomplish which has eternal results, eternal benefits, is our devotional service. So let us not, just simply live a life trying to pass time between point A and point B, between birth and death, as smoothly as possible. It seems extreme, doesn't it? It seems a little shocking. But if we really objectively analyze, we'll see it's actually the reality of life. We're all running around outside of Krishna consciousness, just passing time. And that is prajalpa. So, another significant impediment on our process of bhakti. Niyamagraha. So there are two aspects to niyamagraha. The first is that we accept the rules and regulations of spiritual life for the purpose of obtaining material items. That is a misuse of the ultimate opportunity spirituality has. And the second aspect of Niyamagraha is rejecting the rules and regulations that are meant for the advancement in Krishna consciousness. So accepting and rejecting are aspects of Niyamagraha. Accepting rules and regulations for material gains, or rejecting things that can lead to our success in devotional life. And this accepting them for material gains, it arises out of our greed to fuel our desires. We'll do whatever gives us economic benefit, even if it's spiritually related. Oh, this will help me in my career? I'll get a promotion? I'll get more money? Okay. So like that, this is an impediment on our process of devotional service. Next, association. Association is very, very important for us. And bad association can be very detrimental to our devotional life. So, the recommended association, we should only associate with those in Krishna consciousness. Well, is that really practical? All around me, I see virtually no one is practicing Krishna consciousness. So few. Maybe on Sundays at the temple I can associate. Maybe on sanghas like this I can associate. But the vast majority of my life at the office, at the grocery store, different things I'm associated with. Does that mean I can't talk to anybody? I can't speak with anybody? No. The meaning of association is that to become inspired by someone in contact with them. So when we interact with others in the material world, we be careful not to become inspired by such person. Oh, they have achieved the BMW. Wow, I want that. How they, oh, they're so sophisticated in managing his job. That is unhealthy association. But association doesn't mean to avoid all contact. If you think about the book distributors, right? They're out on the street associating in some means, interacting with so many people. But they are giving association. They are not taking association. They are trying to give inspiration, not being inspired by the rat race around them. So association is very important. So it is very practical for us to be 100% in association with devotees, meaning we only are inspired by those who are also practicing this process of devotional life. But it doesn't mean that we avoid all contact with all people. That is not practical. Okay? And Borijan Prabhu in his class talks about the crystals. You know, our heart is like a crystal. Whatever color is near it, if you have a red light near a crystal, the crystal will shoot out red rays. So like that, whoever we associate with, our heart will also take on those colors, those tendencies, those qualities. And it cuts both ways, as we'll see in the next verse. And just as this is an impediment to devotional life, good association is critical for the success of our bhakti. So association is very, very important. It was, I think it was Michelangelo who said, you know, tell me who your friends are, and I will tell you who you are. So this association is very, very important. And Srila Prabhupada created ISKCON. Why? What is the purpose of ISKCON? To give people an opportunity to associate with those who have not forgotten Krishna. That is a quote from the purport. Again, to give people an opportunity to associate with those who have not forgotten Krishna. That is the purpose. Srila Prabhupada established the temples and ISKCON. He gives the example of the Chamber of Commerce. You know, a Chamber of Commerce is an organization to help businesses associate with each other so they can prosper. ISKCON is an organization like that to give association to help us prosper in devotional life. And so association isn't also just being in the midst of devotees, but it is to take inspiration. Active association means to interact. And Rupa Goswami will speak on verses 4, 5, and 6. 3 verses in this text he's going to speak about how to do devotee association. You can see 25% of this whole book is dedicated to association. So we'll see how important it is. Next, greed. Lolium. This greed is an infection of the mind, this restless mind, restless intelligence, never satisfied. I need more, constantly agitating the mind and intelligence. How I can manipulate things to get more. And it's explained and commented that this greed, it is born out of association, this janasanga. We always are comparing and contrasting. You go to some social circle, oh, this person has this person has that. And in that association, my own greed develops. Keeping up with the Joneses, as we say. It's, if you listen to the commercials on banks, they say, take a home loan, take a loan, build an extension on your home, and be the envy of the neighborhood. What is that? My goal is to have others envy what I have? So silly. But that is what happens in social circles. In this janasanga, we're constantly comparing. I have this, I have that. I'm doing this, my child's doing that. And it fuels our greed. By hearing that, our own desires, oh, I want more and more and more, is fueled. So this greed is very, very dangerous for us in our devotional life. Because it takes us then right back to prayasas, over endeavor. Because I want more, I have to work more. And when I work more for my material senses, I have less time to chant my japa, to read, to study Nectar of Instruction, and so many other things. So, now, greed, we'll see also, there's a very positive. When we become greedy for Krishna, we become obsessed and enthralled in this need to serve. My desire to chant, I don't have to, count on my thing. I'm just constantly chanting. I'm so enthusiastic. I become greedy. I want more and more service, more and more chanting, even more and more prasad. So greed can also have a very positive implication when it is greed for the devotional service. We'll see that's a very important part of our progress, is to develop this intense desire. But materially, greed is very detrimental for our devotional service. So these 6 impediments, overindulging, breaking this simple living, high thinking process. It leads to over endeavor, more and more and more. Unnecessary talking. So much nonsense. Just killing time, wasting this most precious resource. Niyamagraha. Using the scriptures for my material desires, or avoiding them, that can be really beneficial for me in awakening my self-realization. Associating with worldly minded people who don't have a spiritual inclination. It leads to my greed. It wastes my time. It becomes an impediment on my practice of devotional service. And greed. The more I want materially, then the less I can have spiritually. It is a fixed pie. I have so much energy. I have so much effort. I have so much time. And so these 6 things become significant impediments in our process of devotional service. And at the end of the purport, Srila Prabhupada then talks about this real peace formula. You can remember that Srila Prabhupada was writing these purports in the height of the Cold War. And so he speaks about this capitalism versus communism. And he says, real peace, world peace, can only be achieved when we all know who is the real owner. When we realize that everything is owned by Krishna. He is providing everything we need. And that need is being provided for one purpose, one goal. And that is to help us get out of this cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. And to regain our original consciousness. All the facilities of the material world are there, not so that we can enjoy our senses, but so that we can live a basic life and focus on the ultimate purpose, which is to reawaken our loving relationship with Krishna. So when we realize that Krishna is the real owner, and He is giving each of us our quota, Ishavasyamidam sarvam yatkincha digattimtiya, tena tatena bunjitaha magaraha karsha swidanam. That we all have a quota set aside for us by Krishna. And if we live within that quota, everything becomes very nice and peaceful. Right? I remember when I first used to see some of these statements by Srila Prabhupada, I would start to think, man, he seemed a little far-fetched. Maybe a little unrealistic. But actually, as we purify ourselves and we understand it, we'll see this is really the only means to having world peace. Because this atyahara, it leads to the hoarding of resources. And because of this atyahara and prayasas is over-endeavoring, we'll go to any lengths to protect our resource. We'll kill even how much blood has been shed on this planet due to desires of this is my oil, or this is my minerals, or this is my salt, or this is my... None of it which we brought into this world, yet we want to claim it as mine. So real peace begins when we stop atyahara. Imagine a world where we're all living with the land that was given to the Lord. Simple living. Small piece of land, couple cows. Where there would be the need for defining borders. And this is mine and yours. Sufficient is there. The only shortage that exists in this world is due to this over-endeavor. This overconsumption by some leads to shortages of others. Krishna has provided this world as Purnam. Om Purnam Adaha Purnam. It is complete. It has everything all living entities need. We see in nature how every living entity has its food, its shelter, provided for within nature. It is only in the human life that we find these radical shortages. And it is due to this atyahara principle, the breaking of this simple living. So the capitalists, they think, well, everything is mine. The wealth should be mine. I created it. And the communists say, no, the wealth is of the state. But they're both wrong. Both are thieves. Communists give wealth to the nation, capitalists give wealth to themselves, but neither one of them are the owner. The real owner is Krishna. He is provide whatever I may produce on my own, with my own intelligence, I think, still I'm using all of Krishna's resources to create. What did I bring into this world? Nothing. And I'm going to leave this world with nothing. So I must be using something that someone else has provisioned. And that someone else is to Krishna. So when we understand this, then real peace can happen. So the real solution is knowing that everything is Krishna's. And we have to stop taking more than that are necessary. Like that bag of rice. That bag of rice in the forest is sufficient to feed thousands of birds. But if you put a 50-pound bag of rice in the middle of a shopping mall, how many people will it feed? One. Because the first person to come upon it will take the whole thing. And that is the nature of atyahara. Right? So real peace occurs, I quote from the end of the purport, when human society gives up these elementary faults enumerated by Srila Rupa Goswami, atyahara, etc., all enmity will cease between men and animals, capitalists and communists, and so forth. It's a very powerful statement. It's very true. If there was no greed in the world, what conflict would exist? What environmental damage would occur? Nothing. If we went back to simple living, high thinking. So these things become great impediments in our devotional service. So the simple living, high thinking, just some land, a cow, and our devotional service. Wow. No stress, no anxiety, no fear, no wasted time. This is the key. No overeating, no over-consuming, no need to slave away in the factories. I can enjoy reading Srimad Bhagavatam, having wonderful kirtans, rendering service with the devotees. Simple living. But the more I need or create needs for my body, the more I have to endeavor. So we don't waste this time, this precious resource. Srila Prabhupada comments on who is a Mahatma. Okay? One who is focused only on satisfying the senses of Krishna. Okay? Their natural constitutional position is in display. Very broad-minded, he says. Under the protection of the divine energy. This is the Mahatma. And they have understood the key to attaining pure devotional service. And that is to surrender to Krishna. If we overcome these 6 impediments, surrender happens. And if we are surrendered to Krishna, these 6 impediments are gone. Where is the scope for atyahara, or lolium, or janasangas, if we are surrendered to Krishna? So, by avoiding the high living and simple thinking that propagates society today, just eat, drink, and live and be merry. No thinking. Where am I going? Who am I? What is the real purpose? It's complete opposite. But if we can come back to this, so much success happens. And the meaning of this vinashyati, it means to spoil, to vanquish, to destroy, to annihilate. Very strong words. It means that these 6 impediments, they spoil, they vanquish, they destroy our bhakti. So if we cherish and value our devotional service, then we find ways to protect it by avoiding these 6 things. And we'll see the connectivity between them. You know, the more things that I take, the more that I need to eat, the more cell phones I need, the more cars I need. You know? The more I have to work to get it. The more I have to work to get it, I then start to socialize, network with others to figure out, how to do it. And sometimes it'll even take me to God to get it. I'll even pursue scriptural, or if it can't help me obtain my material needs, then I'll just abandon it. Oh, what will this japa do for my bank account? Nothing? Then I won't do it. So I'll reject the scriptural injunctions, even though it's beneficial for me. And I'll associate with others who can help me, who can inspire me to meet my different needs. And it leads to this feeling of greed. So they're all connected. They're all interrelated. And so by breaking these impediments, we can then free up our time and energy for the real purpose of developing our Krishna consciousness. So Rupa Goswami is giving us very practical guidance and instruction. We should be mindful of understanding how to apply these. Again, remembering that things like atyahara, what is too much for one may not be too much for another. It is about personal introspection. And we should find ways to bring atyahara down. Just simple things in our day-to-day activities. Do I really need this? Do I really need that extra pair of shoes? Are my current pair of shoes sufficient? Do I really need that, extra belt? Or do I have another belt? Just simple, small things. I remember when I first studied this, I was traveling a lot and staying in hotel rooms. And one very mundane and simple example of atyara hit me like a ton of bricks. In the hotel, they have 2 bars of soap. One is in the soap dish and the other is for the bathtub. And I thought, I'm staying here one night, but I have to use 2 bars of soap? No, I can use one and move it from the sink to the bathtub and back. But, just simple consciousness. Wait a minute, this is Krishna's energy. Krishna has provided these materials. Yeah, to me it's free, so-called free because I've paid for the room, but it's not free. Krishna is providing it. So why overconsume when it's not really necessary? We go to, the store or something and there are a stack of napkins. They're not free. Materially they may be free, but that's Krishna's energy, resources. Use what's needed. So you can start to bring this concept of atyahara into your life in very small ways. And that consciousness will start to lead to bigger things. And slowly we'll be able to conquer this overindulging. But just start with something as simple as the 2 bars of soap in a hotel room or whatever you may be encountering. And you'll find, do I really need that? And by, slowly pecking away at this, I'll be able to come to this aspect of simple living and high thinking. And it's very practical. Don't take extremes and all of a sudden, okay, I'm going to live in a hut in the middle of the snow, no shoes. You have to be practical. The body has needs, they must be met. But, what is sufficient so that I can dedicate my purpose for the real goal of life? And then we'll find we have plenty of time. Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nantakoti Vaishnavinda ki. Any comments or discussion we can have?
Hare Krishna, bro.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Prabhuji, out of the 6 impediments, I see that the greed is what drives all other 5. Like, because we are greedy, we are overindulged. Because we are greedy, we are overworking and overeating. Almost like everything, like rest of the 5 things are based on that greed. Is that true, Prabhu? Or
yeah, you can see that the greed is the driving force, and the greed comes from our initial intake. But you do over in eating atyahara, it comes from this unsatiated greed. So yeah, you can say the greed is kind of the the driving force for all of these. Absolutely, it's a good assessment.
Okay. So with that thing in mind, Prabhu, like out of this 6 impediments, if you have a strategy to just block that greed or remove that greed or lessen our greed, what is how can we do that?
Well, lessening our greed. So Krishna says greed is one of the royal roads to hell, gateways to hell. Right? So we know it's very dangerous. We've seen it in the connectivity with here. So how to lessen our greed is to increase our greed for Krishna. So the more we become, and we'll see that next week, the more we practice our Krishna consciousness in our devotional service, the more our taste will drive us to those things, and naturally our material greed will subside. So we need to manage it, be conscious of it, and work to increase our spiritual life. And by increasing our spiritual life, we'll naturally lose our material greed and taste. Right? And then again, find very practical ways. The most practical thing I can ask or say in this session is, do I really need it? Whatever it is that we're doing, do I really need it? ask yourself that question. Do I really need that extra sweater? Do I really need that new iPhone? Do I really need that new car? There are times where you need things. But just by using a little bit of intelligence and asking that question, we can start to peck away at this greed and overindulging. Right? So, you can kind of attack it from both sides. Increase our spiritual life, increase our spiritual activities, and also start to find small ways in which we can start to peck away at it. And slowly those small things will grow into big things. So that's how we can approach it.
Thank you, bro. And I have one more question, bro.
Yes.
You mentioned about two main resources we have: time and intelligence. So the time is available for everybody, and then I'm just not sure about the second part. Like, is everybody has intelligence, or is it something that we need to use the time to acquire intelligence?
No, in intelligence is we all human form of life have, sufficient intelligence to accomplish self-realization. So we all have intelligence, whether, and you can argue, well, some have more intelligence than others, and that's true. But the human form of life has the basic level of intelligence required to know who am I, who is Krishna, and what is my relationship. And so, but that intelligence doesn't exist in the zebras. Right? The zebras cannot ask, who am I? Who is Krishna? How do I chant japa? They cannot ask those questions. Only in the human form of life do we have that intelligence. Do we have that asset, that gift? And so, yes, on a relative basis, in the human form of life, there's varying degrees of intelligence. But within the entire species of life, the human form of life has this rare gift, this precious asset of intelligence. And that's what we must utilize it. Because if we use our intelligence just to live highly, how I can live more nicely, I'm not really using my intelligence in its full potential. I have so much more that I can do with my intelligence. What is it? I can solve the problems of birth, death, old age, and disease permanently. But instead, I'm trying to use my intelligence just to feed myself nicely, eat nicely, sleep nicely, mate nicely, and defend nicely. So we all have even the most basic level of intelligence to accomplish that self-realization.
That's my question there, bro. Like, when you say we all have, I feel like it's all based on the surroundings or association we had. So, for example, like my neighbor might not have any association with like any of this topics that we discussed. So, I don't think so. They would be having even the basic idea of like, okay, to understand the self-realization. Unless
but intelligence speaks to the potential.
Like several years ago, like I had no idea of like, okay, this is what.
Yeah, but Prabhu, you're confusing knowledge with intelligence. Intelligence is the potential to understand. Knowledge is knowing. So by association, the knowledge comes. So you may not know previously, or your neighbor may not know, but they have the intelligence to be able to know. Now it's up to them to decide whether they want to know or use that intelligence for that purpose or use the intelligence for some other purpose. So we all have the ability to use the intelligence in different means, either to satisfy my own senses or to satisfy Krishna's senses. So the point is how we're using that intelligence.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Sure, bro. Thanks.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Murti.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
So, Prabhu, I have a question maybe partly related to previous week's verse, maybe even previous, and partly from this week. So, So my question is that there's the fourth category of people who hears it, sees it, experiences it, and still doesn't get it, and keep doing the same thing again and again. You broadcasted the message of Krishna, try to explain them things, but they still don't get it, and they keep doing things again and again. And these are the worldly people, or so-called worldly association, and these are maybe people you cannot disassociate yourself with. You're kind of, you have to live with them. So my question is then, how do you, what's your attitude to this kind of people, and what to speak to them?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you're talking about lower levels of intelligence and those who are hearing but not, able to take the Krishna consciousness, but by circumstance of our position, we are kept in association with them. Well, remember, association means to be inspired by. So we be careful not to take inspiration from them, but try to give inspiration. If they're not ready to take inspiration, at least maintain a neutral stance. So this association, our job, our family relationships, different obligations may bring us into connection with various folks, but that doesn't mean that we have to become inspired by them, that we have to, follow what they're doing. Oh, these people are eating these things, so I should do the same, or they'll feel bad. That's a very practical, example of how somebody's invited me to their house to a party, and now I have to eat there. Well, you don't have to. It's your choice. But you may say, well, no, I have to go. Well, you can go, but know your boundaries. Don't become inspired by it. And our mentality for those people should be of compassion, not judgmental. Oh, these are fallen rascal karmis. They have no intelligence. If Prabhupada thought that, he would have left New York City and never done anything. No, he was inspired by compassion, so he persevered. When initially someone would not take, he'd try another way, and another way, and another way, until they would ultimately take. Not by force, but by inspiration. So we don't become judgmental. Oh, these people are this, that. No, it is due to everyone's conditioning that we have different degrees of which we can take to this knowledge. So our mood should always be of compassion, not of being judgmental or being, having animosity or enmity towards anyone. Like the Brahmana who was walking along the beach, and once a scorpion was going towards the water. And so he picked up the scorpion, and it bit him, and he dropped it. And then the scorpion fell back onto the sand and was walking again towards the water. And the Brahmana thinking, the scorpion cannot swim, and he picked up the scorpion again, and it bit him again. And then he dropped it because out of the pain of being bitten. And again it happened. And the people nearby are looking and saying, what are you doing? The scorpion keeps biting you. He says, yeah, well, it is the nature of the scorpion to bite me, but it is the nature of me as a Brahmana to be compassionate. So I am acting in my nature, they are acting in their nature. So like that, as practicing devotees, aspiring devotees, following in Srila Prabhupada's footsteps and living in his home of ISKCON, we try to be compassionate. That is our mode. Even if someone is, resisting, remain compassionate. It's okay?
So, Prabhu, meaning compassion, should we still kind of preach, or what's the way to preach then, or give the message of Krishna?
Preach in a way that's not annoying. That's what Prabhupada said. Distribute books, but don't be a nuisance. Don't be annoying. Right? So
sure.
that was his instruction. He said, don't be annoying. So we preach in a way that's palatable. If they can't take to it, give them prasad. That's preaching. Very subtly, but very powerfully. And if they're not ready to hear Bhagavatam class from you, then find other ways. Right? So keep preaching, but preach in a way that's palatable for them, that's pleasing to them. Make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you for your question. Someone else had a
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna?
Yeah, Prabhuji. I just want to know the exact difference between this Laulya and Atyahara, because these two, I mean, it looks same, and even writing the homework, I face difficulty.
Yeah. So lolium is the mentality, the infection of the mind of having this, intense desire for more and more. Atyahara is the activity of overindulging. Right. So, and as Anand Prabhu was mentioning, they're kind of, they all stem, the Atyahara stems from our greed. Our greed stems from our worldly association. That's where it fuels. So, but the greed is almost like a mentality, and the Atyahara is the activity, the action of overindulging, overeating, over acquiring. So one is a mentality, one is an activity. It's okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
From the homework, there was one question, generic question, but I gave some answer, but I did not satisfy myself. I want to get some more clarification from you. The person they mentioned, is it possible to only associate with Krishna devotees as householders working? It's practical to associate only Krishna devotees. But can you give me some more light on that, Prabhu?
Yeah, that was similar to Divya Bhakti Prabhu's question, which is, sometimes by circumstance we are put into contact with non-devotees. So then how is it possible to only associate with Krishna devotees? Well, what is the meaning of association? It means to be inspired by. So yes, I am in control of who I may become inspired by. So I only take association, from those devotees that I can become inspired by. But I may come in contact through my dealings with many, many people. But I'm being very careful not to become inspired by them. Now, you can take this to a dangerous point, which is, okay, so I'll go to the disco club tonight and enjoy in association, but I won't be inspired by them. Because we are not so strong to avoid the inspiration from seeing others, so we minimize the contact with all non-devotees that is not required for our basic needs. Again, in the workplace, you cannot avoid association of non-devotees. Don't try it. You'll be fired, and then you'll be suffering. So don't do it. That's not practical. But the point is, in the office place, yes, I associate to the extent necessary for my job. But I don't also have to over-interact. Go to the after-work party because everybody is going. Go, and do this activity. Now, sometimes you have to do even those things to be, to maintain your sort of position in the company. That sometimes is required. Again, it's introspection. You have to decide what is required and what is excessive. But be careful. Because if you think, I can interact with anyone and I won't be inspired, that is foolish. Because we're not so strong. Prabhupada and great acharyas, they could do that. But we can fall to the temptations of others. So I may think, I'm going here, but I won't be associating, I won't be inspired by them. But in the presence of, it's very hard to fight those urges. Right? So as a practicing devotee, aspiring devotee, we be careful to minimize all interactions with non-devotees. So that I don't, put myself in a chance to become contaminated by those thoughts. But, I'm going to have to work. I have to go to different places and I have to do different things. So I do what's necessary for the job. And again, that is one that requires personal introspection. Is this necessary? What's necessary one may not be necessary for someone else. So don't judge anyone else, just judge yourself. And take help from someone who can guide you. Sometimes we need a sounding board, a mirror, to hold up. Is this Atyahara or not? Do I need this, BMW, or can I get away with the, Ford Fusion? It's okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, brother.
But Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
What if non-devotees are like calling for get-togethers or something? Now we are not that strong enough to go there also, and at the same time, just like not be influenced. But at the same time, you need to interact with them, with society. Sometimes we have to do that for the kids too. So how do we kind of maintain that balance? And then if we don't go, then it is considered that we are just like just being like an outcast, or you just don't want to. You're isolating yourselves from the crowd. But despite fact telling them about Krishna consciousness, they're not interested in it. But at the same time, we need to still associate for certain reasons. So how do you strike a balance there, Prabhuji?
I'm debating whether to take a very strong stance or a very soft stance. I'll take a strong stance. How about that? So I'm warning you ahead of time. Okay, I'm warning you ahead of time. I'm taking a strong stance, and then we can discuss further, maybe some middle grounds. But the reality is, what do we mean I need to associate with this person? What do we mean I'm going to be an outcast? Who is an outcast? One who is not serving Krishna. They are an outcast. My eternal, your eternal, every living entity's eternal constitutional position is to serve Krishna. Anyone not serving Krishna is in an abnormal position. If I am not serving Krishna, I am abnormal. Yet if I wear dhoti kurta, I am the one not normal. I am not mainstream. So, what association do I need? Is it the need so that I can fit in the eyes of others? Then that is not needed. Who cares what others think? I should care what Krishna thinks. He is my Supreme Father. I'm willing to ignore my Supreme Father to pacify Mr. and Mrs. Smith? Or Mr. and Mrs. Shah? Why? So, the association we need, we have to define very carefully for ourselves. What association do I need? What do I need that Krishna is not giving me? So, now again, I forewarned everyone I was going to take an aggressive stance. But it's very factual. Just because you may be in the minority doesn't mean you are in the abnormal or outcast state. Your and every living entity's natural state is to be in loving service of Krishna. That is a fact. That is not opinion. That is a fact. In Kali Yuga, we are the outcasts. In Satya Yuga, everyone is practicing devotional life. Then what? So, we should assess in individuals, what relationships do I need? Yes, there will be some relationships in life that we need who may not be Krishna conscious. You should respect their lack of Krishna consciousness, and they should respect your Krishna consciousness. Respect has to go both ways. It's a two-way street. So, I'm not going to judge and disrespect someone because they're not practicing bhakti, but I'm not going to expect them to disrespect me if I am practicing. If they are true relationships of value, if they are true friends, then they will appreciate me for who I am. So, yes, I've isolated myself because now I am practicing Krishna consciousness Yeah, people will make you feel guilty. Why? Because they know they are doing something they shouldn't be doing. So they want to bring down. But Krishna, Prabhupada has given us opportunity for so much association, so much friendship, so much camaraderie. Then what do we need? So if someone's not going to respect our Krishna consciousness, then why am I respecting their lack of? Right? So that's what we have to really assess. Again, there will be situations where there is a real need, but we should evaluate that need and not be fearful of, well, this person will think that, who cares? These are all bodily designations. I am spirit soul, part and parcel of Krishna. If Mr. and Mrs. Smith think I'm a fool, how does it affect who am I as spirit soul? Nothing. It does affect my body, my pride, my position, my status. So, okay, now you can ask more questions because I took an extreme stance.
Prabhuji, I will ask this more in detail, I think, on a personal basis, because I've got some other counter thing on this, but
Okay.
we will leave it at this point of time.
Okay.
And
Very nice.
Prabhuji, one question was regarding the communist and the capitalist. Now, I'm just thinking, is there a difference in the consciousness of their thought? Capitalist is very clear that they are trying to acquire the material wealth for their own gratification for their own senses. Whereas the communist, now if you see, what Prabhupada was actually saying is everything belongs to Krishna, and each and every living entity, which is a creation of Krishna, they are trying to, so they need to, everybody basically has a birthright to use that particular wealth for their basic sustenance. Now, if you see into the philosophy of communalists, so they are actually trying to nationalize that property, right? So they are saying that all that property and then distributing it to each and every living entity, probably within that particular nation, so that everybody gets a right to use that property equally. So though they don't have the consciousness of Krishna in mind, but in a way, aren't they following something similar to what Prabhupada was saying? I mean, I know I'm going to be countered by you, but this is I'm not able to understand what is so different about it, except for the fact that they are not conscious in that way.
Read the beginning of Sri Upanishad, and Prabhupada will introduce this concept of Bhagavad communism. And that means that, so communists maybe have it close because they're saying it's not individual, but it's the wealth of the state. But they're not quite right because it's the wealth of Krishna. So the difference is in the communist state is everyone is not enjoying equally. Look at the leaders of the communists, how lavishly they live, how wonderfully they're situated, and then look at the people, the common folk. Why are there rebellions? Because there's oppression. It is not equal. Why? Because there is greed, there is material desires. It doesn't have a spiritual basis. So, though they're not taking claim for themselves, they're taking claim for the nation, and they are running the nation. So, it is ultimately a personal selfish desire. And that's why it breaks down and doesn't lead to a peaceful situation. So, it must come to the point of knowing it is Krishna's. Then it can lead to a nice solution. Okay. Yes, you have a question?
There's a question online from Vasudev. It's a two-part question. First part, we have lived our life. What should be taught to our offsprings and how? And then the follow-up is, there are many people, teachers, teaching our kids what things are needed for living. These people, teachers, are also doing bad things in the background. What should be done with these people?
So the question is what to teach our children and how to handle the teachings that are coming to our children that may, contradict what we are understanding. So, in practical life, we teach our children these principles. We teach our children the principles that are suitable for them. Atyahara, take what you need. Don't overindulge. Learn to live a simple life. don't put yourself in a situation where if you don't have X, Y, and Z, you're going to be miserable. Don't set your happiness based on your material needs. Set them on your spiritual understanding. So we can teach them how to apply these principles in age-specific ways. And in terms of the material education, I forgot who made this comment, but I really liked it. Somebody made the comment, take the good and leave back the bad. If you're going to learn mathematics, take the mathematics and take it. But if they're going to teach you mathematics on how to, calculate something that's inappropriate, well, forget that piece of it. So we have to give our children spiritual education so that they know from the material education they're getting what is relevant and what is good and what they should just sort of set aside. Don't argue with the teachers. Don't get into a fight. It's not going to be good for your grades. So don't do that. But know internally what is right. I remember my son had a class and they were teaching religion. And it came to the point where the books were teaching things that were completely wrong and bogus. And he's like, what to do? Well, you have to answer the test according to the materials in the book, even though they're wrong. Otherwise, you're going to fail the test. So the practical, but know that they're wrong. Maybe use your intelligence and a way to, discuss with the teacher. Hey, I'm going to answer it this way, but just know this is wrong. But, so we have to, be practical in, again, our interactions with the world. So, take the good that's needed for our, existence in society and leave behind the bad. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
I have one question. In the purport, I saw something called extended sense gratification. So, what is this extended sense gratification means?
Do you remember where it was? So just so I can.
I think in the second page of the verse 2, maybe the second page of the verse 2, where it says, you would have, renounced your gratification, but you may still fall in an extended sense gratification.
Oh, yeah, I got it. I see. Actually, this is all extended sense gratification. So the point that Prabhupada is making is that, I am making money, but not for me, but for my family. So that is extended. It's not my own, but it's my family. So my gratification comes from their gratification. Or, I am making money so that I can give to, this cause, material cause, that is. So but it's still my own gratification because I'm getting gratified by that secondary gratification. So he's extending it to just, I am not overindulging, but then I'm supporting someone else's overindulgence. So that's what Prabhupada is referring to as extended sense gratification. So it extends beyond our own personal experience.
So Prabhu, if you see in practical, I think every parents is trying to do this because they want to give a good material facilities to the kids and save a lot to kids for their future. And I think this has also been quoted in that purport where, saving properties, so it's very difficult to digest this thing. So I'm just kind of...
Yeah, so as a parent, you said very nicely that we want to give what is good for our children, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is good for your children? What is good for Shamantaka and Mitravinda? What is good for them?
All these... it's both some it's a mix of material and this thing, but then it's very difficult to.
Do you want them to have Atyahara?
No.
Do you want them to have Lolium?
No.
Do you want them to have Janasangas? Prajalpa? No, you don't want any of them for them, right? So you're going to leave them some wealth in a way that doesn't inspire these things, right? You don't want them to be impoverished and living on the street, right? So you want them to do simple living, high thinking. So you want them to be able to meet their basic needs, but you want to teach them that their real happiness will not come from more zeros in the bank account. It will come from more japa. So as parents, all parents, Krishna conscious parents and material parents, have the same goal: success for their children. But they're defined success differently. So your ambition for success for your children is a requirement. You are a grahasta. You as a father and mother, we have a responsibility to deliver our children back home to Godhead. That is success. That is our responsibility. So in the means to do so, we may have to train them in, material knowledge so that they can, enter grahastha ashram, live a life that will allow them. But if we're not we're not giving them education so that they can do atyahara. We're giving them education so that they can do bhakti. We're leaving back some facilities. Rupa Goswami said 25% of your wealth should be set aside for family. But not so that they can overindulge, but so that they can maintain themselves in a peaceful way so they can focus on spiritual life. Right? So there is too much and too little in this regard. If we give them too much, the potential for greed will manifest. Right? So the means is, again, and that's why, again, all of this has to be individually applied, right? It's not like a blanket statement. Okay, you can leave this amount of money for your children, or you can give them this kind of no, it's very individual. But again, you want success for your children. You have to define what is success. Society defines lots of things as success. So society will define if your child's a doctor, it's successful. If your child is rich, you're successful. If they're famous, it's successful. Society will define those. But is that what you define as success? If it is, then give them that. If you define something else as success, then give them that. You have to decide as a parent what is success.
Okay.
Right? And that's what we're all in the process of doing for ourselves. We have determined to some degree that eating nicely, sleeping nicely, mating nicely, and defending nicely is not going to give me success. But then why are we trying to do that for our children? It's mind-numbing. But we do it because society says we should. I don't want to be an outcast. I have to show to my neighbors how well my kids did on this and how they are going to do that.
Okay.
Okay.
So one more question, Prabhu. Like I have, this is regarding the time. So since we are in the Kali Yuga and the previous yugas had more time and more living life of those people. So for us living in this Kali Yuga, the time is very short. So in this situation, how to overcome this time? Because I understand that we waste a lot of time. We have a lot of time still. So is there any? My question is right, or I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a very astute question, because what you're recognizing is time is very precious because we have limited hours in this body. And so if we recognize that, then we'll be very mindful of my time, right? I'm not going to waste time because it is very precious. How many more years do we have? Anybody knows? Yet I'm going to spend, the next 6 hours, researching some random topic on the internet. Or I'm going to spend, some time to go, see some, movie. Or I'm going to spend some time, so much nonsensical things we do. I said, what am I getting out of that time? So if I recognize, yes, I have very limited time and I have a great opportunity. I have a great opportunity and limited time. Then we'll be enthusiastic, as Rupa Goswami will tell us next week. So, but if I'm not conscious that my time is precious, I'll waste it. Just like if I'm not conscious that water is precious, I'll waste it. If I'm not conscious that money is precious, I'll waste it. So if I really understand that my time is most precious resource, then I won't waste it. And if you analyze in the last 1 week how many hours we wasted, meaning I didn't get anything out of it, anything of real value, you'll see so much time we waste. So much time we waste. Okay? So there is never a shortage of time to practice bhakti. And I can say that absolutely never. No matter how busy our life is, no matter how complicated our life is, we may make excuses. Maya may convince us, and she does a darn good job to convince us we don't have time. But the reality is, it doesn't exist. Now I'm in this mood of speaking very slow. You have to just tolerate me. Maybe I haven't had breakfast yet. But the time is a most unsupported excuse. We have time. We don't have taste. So, if we just recognize what you said, which is life is short in Kali Yuga, and we are in the midst of the golden era of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's spiritual renaissance, I should chant my rounds the first thing I get up in the morning. Spend my time with the most valuable thing I can do in the day. Then I'll do all my other things. I should understand and study. I should get my homeworks in immediately. I should, take shelter of a spiritual master. I should render service in the temple. All these things I should do tomorrow. If not tomorrow, today. But it comes from time.